since. It's certainly gone up, which is indicative, but not entirely the explanation of our unemployment, which has become so long-term. And why? It's that long-term employment that really devastates a family, and that devastation is so apparent in the way that people sometimes feel about themselves. Even it extends sometimes into how they treat each other and so on. You going to join our group? Or are you just here for coffee? Either way is wonderful.
Christine is part of our chamber.
Oh, good to meet you. And if you're going to be able to join us, have a chair. Right? So anyway, kind of questioning why some of those things have happened and really been allowed to happen in Oregon are of great concern to me. And then I look at what can be done at the federal level to bring improvements. And that's really interesting for me because different people, and this kind of identifies with your world. Last night, a number of us were out at Canby, where the students had arranged a forum with virtually as many candidates as they could get to come being there. And all of us talked about what was an issue for us, but I wanted to turn it around because my whole thing is about listening, which we'll get to in just a moment here as well. And I asked the students there to text me, what is it that is of greatest interest to you? What should the federal government be doing or not doing for Canby High School right now? What message would you like to bring to the federal government? I just thought it would be very interesting. And wouldn't you know, I forgot my phone this morning where I would read some of them to you. But wow, were they interesting. What do you bet were the comments? Was it this stuff that I've got on my card, or was it something else? What do you think? What do you think it would be?
Probably a bridge at Canby to get across the river.
We want out and in.
Was it a team save that they wanted to save that?
A center, something like that. It did relate to their school.
Yeah, it's made more money for arts and music and those kind of things. All that stuff's been cut. So.
Yeah, and it wasn't about more money, although the things they were talking about would have taken more money, I'm sure. But they were about a little bit different level there in my feeling about education. They were things like, I would really like to be able to go on a field trip someday.
Okay. Yeah. Take advantage of
That's basic stuff, really basic stuff. And then, of course, you think about what's the role of the federal government in that, particularly for someone such as myself who totally believes that education is local and that education should be controlled and delivered locally. And if this is against some of the things that you believe, I want to hear about it. But I think that the federal guidelines that have been put in place from the Department of Education haven't done a darn thing to raise the quality of education. And what does raise the quality of education is what happens at the local level, what happens with the teachers, what happens with the local administration in terms of the administration supporting the teachers, making it to where it's an environment that is really good to be able to deliver what they've been able to deliver. What if we get away with the Department of Education at the federal level? Oh my goodness, we wouldn't have No Child Left Behind. What a pity. I would say, hallelujah. I would say that that isn't making our education better. It's not hitting anything. So if we got rid of the Department of Education, along with a couple of other agencies over time, look at the amount of money that would be generated. Just right there would be, just with that, way over $1 billion per state. But wait a minute. We shouldn't be collecting that money for the federal level, taking off all that money at the federal level, and then whittling it down to the local level, because what happens at every level? They pull off their administrative money. And so what is getting down to the local level is not what it should be if we just kept the feds out of it, in my opinion. So if we would take away those kinds of expenses for the items that should be delivered locally, that's a start in accomplishing some of these things and even addressing, in my opinion, some of the things that those kids were looking for. And that they were, the particular comment about field trip, by the way, was from a junior high student. So anyway.
Do you want us to jump in with questions now, or you want to finish?
Anytime.
Now, when you say get rid of Department of Education, are you meaning at the federal level, so there'd still be a Department of Education for Oregon?
Yeah. I'm talking, and
so you're talking about the checking system would still be there, would just come from each state on the subject.
Exactly. And each state figures out how they want to do it. And I would bet that their standards would be just as high or higher than No Child Left Behind.
So do you have any idea how much money would be saved?
Well, just 63 billion right off the.
Okay, so the money would still be kept in the state for the schools.
Yeah, and imagine never even going to the feds. Because as we look at these things, fiscal responsibility, if we are able to balance our budget, and I would support a balanced budget amendment, but I frankly don't think it's very probable that that's going to happen. The last amendment to the Constitution took 200 years to get passed, so we don't want to wait for that. So I think we should be behaving as if we have a balanced budget amendment, even though we don't right now.
But I think the question also is, why even discuss the budget? Why are we talking about this? And the reason that we discuss the budget is that if we don't and we continue down this same path, we're in danger of losing our liberty as we know it now. Because that can have all kind of devastating consequences if, for example, the dollar ceases to be the standard of living. And right now there's discussion about the dollar not becoming the standard of living.
Well, no, actually did it a
And
different
so
way, but I just.
once that happens, what's the consequence? Well, then we've got to get serious about how we're spending our money. And then when we start talking about how are we spending our money, then we got to look at what kind of return are we getting and where we're spending it now. And if you look at the Department of Education, the return that we've got is pretty low. Test scores have gone down. High school dropout rates have gone up. And so then how do we justify it? And then how do we justify these other agencies? And I think that becomes a national discussion, is saving our liberty and how we're going to do it.
So if we're looking for $1 trillion to cut in order to balance the budget, that's a lot of money, and you can't do it by nickel and dime. You've got to make some major swaths so that you can get there.
So William Bennett, a former Secretary of Education on TV on Tad Smiley show, he was saying that the biggest expenditure by far in the Department of Education is Title I grants to low-income school districts and students. Yet we've not had any progress in that area. I'm not sure you will if you focus only on that group to see immediate change. But it could be that, as you're saying, that less bureaucracy and less of a re-grant process where you have to apply by district and by state to the feds to get your own money. That may be a waste of time.
Or to get a part of your money back.
But it seems to me there needs to be an outside standard. You can't have 50 states having different standards.
You should have 50 bureaucracies instead of one. You know, a bunch of
but
militias
now,
instead of one, you know, whatever.
Yeah, but now we don't have one. We have 51, right? Because like you say, the states do too. But that's just a, yeah, but that is, and maybe there would be another agency somewhere if some kind of national, what would you call it, monitoring of test scores, that type of thing were needed. But does it need a huge bureaucracy to do it?
Well, I mean, I think if you're talking about nickel and diming, $63 billion or whatever compared to $1 trillion, it's still nickel and diming versus big picture, right? Is making the education system more efficient, more important than maybe having less people in prison so that we can put more money in education. You know, that's how you really look at big change, is not siloing everything, But how does it, how do you reduce military expenditures in the military industrial complex? And the prison system has become a huge cash drain. And the drug war on drugs has cost more money than the Department of Education. So,
Absolutely.
it's those kind of things that funnel, but where does it go? If you save money, where does it go? That's when Washington starts fighting over bridges to nowhere or whatever else. Is it important to go back into education? Well, if you want to fill out a prison, survey says yes.
Well, and when we get to that point, we also can't forget, we need to pay off our debt. Because right now, that's 6% of our federal budget, for which we are having to borrow in order to pay that interest, to add to the debt.
Austerity measures, austerity versus get the economy going, again, nickel and diming. If you balance the budget now when things are terrible, you'll do like what Europe's doing, which is putting itself back into recession. Versus if you figure out a way to get the economy going, you have more money, get more taxes that then pay off the debt faster. So, it's Tea Party versus economic science.
I don't know if you guys are aware that, this is the saddest fact, is that we have more young men between the ages of 18 and 25 in prisons in America than four-year colleges. There can't be that many bad people out. And most of them are non-violent crimes. Prisons are big business in America. They've become that way, and it's kind of sad.
Do you know what that ratio is in Oregon?
I don't, but
It's even worse if you look by color.
Oh, definitely.
Or socioeconomic
and
factor.
going back to, like you're saying, wars bankrupt countries. We're going bankrupt as a country because we are funding wars. There was a reason why Russia was happy to give us Afghanistan. They went bankrupt because of it. Now we are. There's a thing we need to
So let me kind of refocus our conversation, if I may. No, I appreciate that. I love it. So anyway, I mentioned about education because that was where I was last night and got that feedback from the students and just was reflecting on how that relates to these kinds of items here. So one of the things that I would like to learn from you is actually the same question that I asked the students, but I know that we would get very different answers here, is what do you think are the prime things that a person going to Washington should focus on? And the reason that I ask that is my own background is in business, as a business dean. And so I'm very comfortable in the economic arena. That's my home. Watching the economic indicators is my home. I love that stuff. I love budgets. I love numbers. All of that is second nature to me. So that's where I tend to lie, you see, as far as my natural inclination. But if a person looks at that vast landscape, you can't even dream of doing it all. That would be a ridiculous notion. So you have to start somewhere with groups of people that are like-minded. Where should the start be made in a very specific way that would most help Oregon?
I think for Oregon, it's the balance of natural resources and jobs and the environment, because they're all in conflict with each other right now. And that's a place where the federal policy really should have some role. You can't have the states making policies on air pollution, because air pollution blows all over the borderlines. And yet that's by clamping down on fishing and lumbering and so forth, that it's really a devastating effect, particularly on eastern Oregon and coastal Oregon, which you would represent. And I don't know where that balance point is, but it seems to be driven by special interests rather than the picture.
And your word balance is key there. Yeah. And let me just kind of comment on that. In talking to some of the people who just pick up on the lumber industry, for instance, the thing that they're feeling very strongly is the need for the return of the federal land where it's not military base or something that's maybe reserved for the tribes or whatever, but the return of that land in some fashion to private enterprise, so that
where did it come from? It didn't come from private enterprise necessarily. That money was federal property which was given to people in the 19th century.
Right, right.
It's like we gave so much money to the railroads.
Well, and that's one of the models that some of the people in the lumber industry would like to see now, is that it still be given. I'm not sure that given our fiscal picture that just giving it is a realistic thing that other people could be persuaded to do. It would certainly be good for Oregon. But all of this affects primarily the West Coast, because the federal land in Oregon is about 53% overall, over 60% of the forest. In Nevada, it's over 90%. But out in the east, it's more like 2%. So all the states don't have equal interest in this particular issue. So does that seem to the rest of you like a focus that should be, because it does mean jobs?
I think that's secondary. Let me tell you, I think the biggest focus, without a doubt, we have to, if the rest of the world can figure out a medical care system, we need to do it. It's about time.
Well, that's the elephant in the room.
Because us
If you
baby
want
boomers can't
security
retire. So guess what's happening? All these young folks are coming out of four-year colleges with lovely degrees, big student loans, and they can't get jobs. Why? Because we can't get out. We can't retire. So unless our baby boomers, if we don't retire, the young people are never going to live the quality of life we lived ever in the way of salaries that they've made. I mean, I've worked for a school district for 18 years, but my husband and I have our own company too on the side, so I kind of have that business. I know what you're talking about there. But if we don't figure out a base healthcare system, at least in Oregon, for everybody, not just for the poor people, for everybody. But us middle class people, you know, I'm kind of tired of funding the poor people with the medical. I'm tired of paying an extra $1,000 a year to fund somebody who doesn't have medical insurance in this country. I mean, in Oregon, that is our biggest thing. We are not going to be able to retire if we don't get it. There's some medical system.
Well, even if you do retire, then the long-term care is the elephant in the room.
Well, if it's a system that is well managed, like you said, locally, it doesn't have to come. I mean, yes, it would come from the feds, but if Oregon had a local good system that worked, we'd probably be able to do that. I mean, I just think it's criminal that all these young people coming out of college cannot get full-time jobs. Everything's part-time because no employer wants to mess with the medical. They don't want to spend that money.
Actually, as coming from, I spent 15 years in high tech and then moving into do my own business, the biggest killer of innovation and entrepreneurs is how do you pay for your insurance?
Exactly.
Right? If you have a family, you know, Cobra payment's $1,600 a month, right? You have to have a business that generates a lot of cash right out of the gate just to pay your insurance.
Disability insurance is all.
Well, that's not, that's just basic medical, you know, that's not dental or
it is
vision
number
or.
one. It's got to be, because the thing is, I mean, we want to retire, but if we don't get this younger generation come in, they're not going to be trained, they're not going to have a good work ethic, and we're never going to get out of the workforce. And that's like top heavy. It's just not working.
That's my focus. My
Do you-
focus holistically is to try to help people figure out what most people are like. They're saying, you know, they're 50-something and their kids are just about to are going to go to college.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to retire until they're 70. You know, it doesn't matter what Social Security says, they're getting 8% raise or whatever each year they go and keep going, but they're not going to be able to.
And I don't agree with this double dipping. I don't agree with teachers, with us getting out of the workforce and then coming back and double dipping and taking jobs away from the young people coming out of college. That's what's happening. I don't think it's fair that those people should be double dipping. We should be able to retire what we make over the years.
Do you believe that the federal government should mandate what coverages insurance companies provide?
Well, that's.
If they have to do it, they have to do it. We've got to start somewhere. We've got to start
A
somewhere.
minimum level, yeah.
I mean, you
As a
know,
minimum, but a lot of extra things that would be mandated by federal law, do you think that they should do that? Or do you think you should be able to pick and choose your policy? I won't coverage on
I
this.
don't think most people, again, it's having finance, it's people understanding what they even have. Because that's most of what I spend my day doing, is explaining what they have, so they know where the gaps are. So someone's got to look out for people, and if it's on at the state level, at the federal level, whatever, but there's got to be basic coverage. You can't, someone can't buy insurance and then find out that nothing's covered.
Well,
The insurance companies are going to have loopholes everywhere. That's
When
their
you buy
job.
car insurance, you get to pick your deductible. You get to pick, how much liability you have. You get to pick whether or not you want front windshield coverage and things like that. And so, if we choose a policy that covers everything, we can afford it. But we have like $500 deductible on our insurance and so on, and to try to keep our rates down. And then we have that freedom, which, and then we've got a number of companies to pick from.
Well, maybe they give you 2 or 3 companies, but not 20. I mean, I don't know if you've sat with an older person navigating Medicaid. I sat with my in-laws the other day. It's overwhelming. So make it easy for people.
Yeah,
Either 1 or 2 systems and choose one or the other. That's what Australia has. They have a system where everybody has a base plan, and if you want to buy extra tiers for whatever extra things you want, but let's just have a base plan to begin, so it's not bankrupting us. America's the only country in the world where they make a profit on people being sick, and we're all going to get sick. We're not robots. Human beings are going to get sick. It's a risk. It's a gamble. It's a Russian roulette if you're sitting there with no medical insurance.
I want to validate one thing that you're saying about the importance of this issue from some walking that I've been doing in Congressional District 5, just going door to door. And sometimes people just say, thank you so much, it's great to meet you. I haven't had a congressperson candidate come by my door for 20 years, the 20 years that I've lived here. And thank you for doing, that may be all they say. 5 seconds, it's done. But some of them want to talk, and invariably what they want to talk about is medical care.
Good.
That is the subject. And for instance, we were out in a little community where there were some people that were right near a lot of little boutique types of retail operations going on. And there were some folks that had little homes stuck in the middle of them. It was a delightful little area there in Silverton. And a lot of the people were out on their front porch. There was a man going by playing a banjo, and it was just a wonderful environment there. But when you started to talk to them, they felt a lot of fear. They felt fear for their personal future, and it was because of medical care. And they, for instance, at one front porch, there were 3 women, and they all were at a different place in their lives, but they all had a similar concern. One of them was fearful of Obamacare, or the Affordable Medical Care Act, because she was actually in the industry and realized that in trying to read just a few pages of that act, it is impossible to understand for any normal human being. If you haven't picked it up, just to look at a few pages of it, I really encourage you to do that. It is mind-boggling. And they'll refer to section 5.308 that is someplace else in the act. You can't find it, and it's absolutely phenomenal.
I tried to read it online. I knew less when I got done reading it than I knew when I started.
Well, yeah, but compared to your insurance policy, it's in the same language. It's
Oh,
all
but it's 1,000 pages of it.
I know.
And then
It's all lawyer speak.
Yeah, and then a second thing that another woman was concerned about, she is working so hard in her business, just lovely. She is working so many hours. And she said the same thing that you just indicated. I do all of this work, and I can't afford an insurance policy. And what's going to happen for me and my kids when we become ill sometime? And like you said, she didn't use the word robot, but how are we going to deal and cope with this as a family? And she said, I'm not prepared for that, and it makes me almost cry every time I think about it. So what I want to do is validate that I'm hearing this everywhere and understand that it has to be a priority. It has to be a priority.
And the other part of that too, the reason people are so fearful, especially retiring, is they're retiring, about half the people are retiring on Social Security alone.
Exactly.
And that's basically retiring into poverty. And so, again, that's something else. The fact there is no more pensions unless you're a public employee, people don't necessarily look out for the best interest and even if they have control. And now the corporations can say, hey, we gave you the option. You had all the options. You didn't have to, get the front windshield protection. You didn't pick it. And now look at what happens, right? They're retiring on Social Security because they put all their money with Fidelity and they all got lost.
Well, clearly, if we have a role of the federal government in this, we need to do it carefully so it's not going to violate the Constitution in the eyes of so many states that then litigate against the federal government that tends to just stop the whole thing, which is where it is right now. and that doesn't help us at all, and I think adds to the fear, actually. So,
Is the state trying to block it, or is it the insurance companies who are lobbying against it
It's
and
probably both.
rousing up?
it's both, but I know it's coming
mandatory
from the
insurance.
states too. Yeah, it's both. And by the way, I'm not sure that we said this to all of you who are here, but at the very beginning, I want to make clear that when a person is elected, they should at that point no longer think in terms of I am a whatever, fill in whatever their party is. Because what we've got to do is do things that are right for the people based on our listening to the people. And why my theme has become wake up Congress is because I don't feel that listening is going on now, and that is tragic. And like I said earlier, I don't feel that I'm represented right now because what I see in terms of votes and so on, I'm just not feeling that I'm being represented. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. So and my attitude toward service. So we've got
They like Obamacare or Romney care. They're both the same, right?
Yeah, they're all the same. It's got to be some base plan we've got to get them. If it's called, I mean, all the doctors in America come out of the same medical schools. We have a pretty high standard in America. So if people are scared about care like that, that's just brainwashing. So people should put care in
The
America.
only solution to healthcare costs down here is to cut out the middleman. 25% or a third of the cost of the insurance is state insurance. It doesn't have to be.
the regulations are very high and the litigation is still high.
That's another big issue that should be solved.
And talking
Insurance reform is certainly critical.
yeah, and talking with the physicians about the percentage of cost that goes toward defensive medicine, it's typically estimated at about a third of the total cost. Well, that's huge. Yeah, huge. And so we think about all of the unnecessary CAT scans or whatever it is that might be done. And yet, how many of us, when we're the patient, want that unnecessary CAT scan to be done for us? So it's a problem that is facing in the nation for sure.
It's a tough one. I've got lymphoma cancer that I've got. I've been had for 20 years. But prior HMOs did not want to do that scan. And finally, I got the one who would do it. Some there's a we worked on so it would have been so much cheaper. Block that system.
We're friends.
When you talk to the doctors, though, their biggest cost for them is malpractice insurance.
Yeah,
So,
That's what you
that's
said.
wrong.
And that's a part of this
Yeah,
defensive
skinny.
medicine.
But you know, in other countries, you can't, there's a cap. You can't get more than $10,000 in a medical lawsuit in Holland, Sweden, and all these other countries. Well, America could do that too. We could put a cap.
to make it criminal to leave sponges inside of somebody and not, yeah.
I mean, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law are doctors in the Dells.
Thought it was.
You know, I think one of the answers to the malpractice insurance problem is full disclosure about the doctor's records so that you can see all the problems that being had. But right now, as a patient, you don't know if they have something inside somebody at some point or something like that.
Well, I mean, I think part of that is, I mean, a litigious society in all fact. So again, if you're looking to skin the cat, it's figuring out how to do something about people suing people for everything. You essentially have to have a lawyer on retainer as a normal citizen just to protect yourself from people suing you if you're on your sidewalk. So.
Anyway, that's a big one.
It is a huge
It's the
one, for
one,
sure,
really.
yeah. And, you know, and there's no doubt in my mind also that the whole arena that is associated with jobs has got to be at the forefront as well. Because we are still suffering from that long-term unemployment in ways that are devastating.
But if we get to retire, then the other kids can come up to the ranks. We staying in the workforce too long.
It's all interrelated, that's for sure.
We should be able to 62, 65, get out so the younger people can come in. We should be able to afford.
Yeah, well, the challenge though is that retirement now is 30 years as opposed to 5 or 6.
Yeah,
So.
but that's what's causing this imbalance. And we should be able to, we don't have to retire much ton of money. is still spending that kind of money at that age. That's a problem. Us baby boomers have got so greedy. We just want to keep on getting everything for ourselves. I mean, I really feel sorry for this next generation coming through.
There's one other area, since I'm business oriented by virtue of my background, that is very troublesome for me, and it's kind of under the headline here of both free enterprise and limited government. And that's the notion of the federal regulations that interfere with the private industry in ways that are so deep now. When I think about how do we increase jobs, one of the things that comes to mind, probably because I at one point was appointed by the Secretary of Commerce to help the Western region with exports. And so I know that by increasing exports in the high-tech industry, we've got our #1 export from Oregon, that we can create jobs, and that would be a good thing. But what happens then with the increase in trade is the increase of regulations on American firms that is not necessarily required by the country to which we're exporting. It's required by the federal government in order to be doing what somebody somewhere in Congress feels is right. For instance, you're going to have to invest X amount of money in Y country if you're going to trade there. Well, that's fine, I guess, as long as it's affordable by the company. But when it becomes an interference, like it does for a couple of iron exporters in Oregon, to where they can't afford what is being demanded by the federal government for no particular reason, then they can't export anymore. Well, then the people associated with that end up losing their jobs. I'm associated with the phase out of the death tax in Oregon as its spokesperson. And there's another case where you see at both the state and the federal level very high death tax. And so what happens then, of course, is at the time of death of the matriarch or patriarch in the family, is that the death tax is imposed at this very difficult time in the life of the potential heirs, particularly of a family business or a family farm. And they have to figure out, well, how am I going to pay this tax? Because they need to have cash money in order to do it. And very few businesses are going to have liquid assets to be able to just pay, say, a tax that's around 50% of their assets, whatever it may be, depending on how the totals work out for them. So they have to sell things in order to have the liquid assets. And now all of a sudden, the business is no longer intact to the point that the heirs of the business can work there anymore. So they lose what would have been their job, or maybe is their job right now. So it's, again, and it's a very small percentage, actually, of our overall budget, both in Oregon and at the federal level. But it's one that affects jobs dramatically. In the U.S., it'd be 1.5 million jobs. In Oregon, it's 44,500 jobs.
That are affected by
that would be phased back in if we were phasing out the death tax in Oregon and in the United States.
You know, I guess
The
whole thing is
fairly low, $1 million to $2 million.
Yeah.
It's the very, very wealthy that are benefiting.
Well, the very, very wealthy, though, is a misnomer, Jerry, because it typically affects people with family farms and family businesses, because those assets accumulate as far as their estimated valuation quickly in a way that doesn't really represent their lifestyle. These are the same people who may be very well struggling for their health care. But it's just that the business that they have, may have a valuation that's higher than what we would
because
maybe think
again,
about.
the system's rigged against a lot of people. This whole thing is it's an avoidable thing. It shouldn't happen to people, but again, they have to be planning for it. If they plan for it, then they can avoid those. But they have to coordinate with a tax trust attorney. They have to work with a financial advisor. They have to do.
Oh yeah, they could plan for all of that stuff, but the rates change by both the federal
exactly.
government
Well, that's the thing.
and
If there was
states
any
from time to
consistency
time.
in it.
Yeah, and a lot of what business people say is, I need something consistent so I know what my environment is. And these are not, big businesses certainly would be faced with it too, but family businesses is where my concern really lies on that. So, and family farms, but anyway, there are a lot of things that are relatively simple that can be done for jobs that would help us, I think, in many secondary and tertiary kinds of ways. And those things we just need to do. Like right now, it amounts in Oregon to signing petition 15 so that will get on the ballot and be something that the Oregon voters can vote for or vote down if they so choose. But it's a simple thing to do to get it on the ballot now. All we need is 87,400 signatures, something like that.
You know, I'm a small business person too, not in your category, but one of the things that I look at is trying to manage my overhead. And so I said, when I'm looking at my balance sheet, so what can a legislator do for me to help me manage my overhead? And one of the main things that I look at is taxes. And so, you know, I work and I work and I work and I look at my balance sheet and, hey, I've done pretty well. And then I have to pay my taxes. And my gosh, my incentive to prosper kind of goes down a little bit. And then you look at your insurance and your liability and unanticipated costs. For example, I was importing fruit and I got checked for drugs. And they unloaded the whole load, went through it all, damaged my product, and then I got a bill from the customs people, $2,200 for their labor for checking my product for drugs. I had no idea what was going to happen.
It's random.
It's random.
Checks are random.
And it's kind of like being stopped for a traffic ticket. How do you bill for this time? Well, those kinds of things can really hurt a business if you get hit too many times like that.
Or especially a small business with low overhead.
Yeah, unexpected. I mean, again, it's unexpected stuff, whether it's so convoluted that no one can figure it out in the big case. If you can estimate what it is, well, then you add it to your markup. I mean, that's basically what ends up happening to, you know, in tax corporations all you want, and it just means it costs us more money. You know, so.
Yeah, the business ends up, hopefully in that case, not paying what the customer does, and then we know what happens in the cycle then, so.
Yeah, I mean, it all flows through.
Yeah,
As long as it's all a level playing field, as long as your competitor doesn't not have to pay the tax, you know, with the loophole that they get to have, right? If everybody has the same thing, then yeah.
Well, another situation I got into regarding that, I was importing avocados. Well, if you import them in a certain window, your tariff is so much. After that window, your tariff goes way up, and then a month later, your tariff goes down. It goes up, it goes down. Well, it depends on the shipping dates, it's things that's totally out of your control. And that could be several $1,000. Well, I think that's silly. And so the guy that's importing avocados that got in the window, he's good. If you're outside the window, it really hurts you. And you don't have any control because it's based on volume, how much avocados come in. And you don't know what the volume is. And so those kind of federal regulations really
If you want scalability, or I think the way to go would be value-added taxes, where it's predictable, it's always the same percent on every sale, every transaction.
You can never get a sales tax passed in Oregon.
So I called the feds and I said, when is this window going to close? Well, we don't know. It's based on volume. What's on the boats now coming from Chile? Well, we don't know exactly. And so it's based on imports going to come into the bond. And
I just looked at the clock and see that it's time to wrap up. So let me just give a couple of concluding remarks, and I know that I have to go fill out some federal regulations for the monthly reporting period of expenses, and it's going to take me quite a long time, so I need to get to that. It's interesting, and that's our topic, right? I just want to say that I thank you, first of all, for coming to dialogue, because I think that is something that on both sides of the fence is essential and very, very important for the listening that I think our Congress people should be doing on a regular basis. And I thank you for that. And I hope that from this you can see that I really would be the kind of person who wouldn't just say I would listen, but would, and that doesn't go away after being elected. That to me is number one. I think it's a part of integrity, it's a part of trust. It's not the only part of integrity and trust, but it's a key part. I come from a background, like I said earlier, that some of you heard, that is business oriented, and I just believe very firmly that the federal government needs more of a way of thinking about our budget that is in line with good accounting principles, that is able to look at budgets and give some control to them, where an out-of-control budget is not working for the country right now. The increase that we have in our debt, as Earl said earlier, is something that is truly becoming bothersome. We see China, for instance, right now collecting gold, and the reason that they're doing that is likely to be in anticipation of not having the U.S. dollar being the standard. Those kinds of things are very frightening for our kids and grandkids in terms of the kind of fiscal situation that we would give to them. I saw one time in going through one of our area cities, blessed are our children, for they shall inherit our national debt. And at first I kind of smiled about it, but then I didn't, really, because that is in fact one of the big concerns. If you believe that this campaign is something that is in accordance with your agreement on what we should be seeing in Congress, I need your support. I welcome it in many, many ways. Just ask me and I'll give you a way that fits with what you like to do, whether it's financial or putting out yard signs. We've got it all. So, and everything in between, walking and calling and you name it. So again, thank you so much for coming, and I hope to stay in touch. Appreciate it.
And feel free to get more coffee at some point.